Welcome, Salena. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
So, tell us a little bit about who you are, who you work with, where folks can find you on Instagram.
Hi. Yes. Okay. So on Instagram, I am Psychology with Salena, which is a mouthful. I'm sure we'll have it tagged down below. But I'm a licensed psychologist, do full time private practice working with late diagnosed autistic adults is kind of the niche I've found myself in. So doing that full time, fully remote. I'm licensed in, I think it's about 42 states in the US, which is through that SciPact thing, which is really cool. So kind of all over the country right now.
Very cool. Has that always been your niche, or how did you kind of get into working with that population?
Yes and no, I would say is kind of the short answer. When I was going through schooling, definitely the autism population was where I found myself doing a lot of like my practicums and things like that. However, it was with a very different side of that population. So, really high support needs, a lot of little kids, things like that. Each year, as I kind of gained more experience, I found myself working with older and older populations, less support needs. My last like externship before graduation was at a college setting. So,
Mm-hmm.
really kind of getting that experience really formed, yeah, where I'm at right now.
Very cool. It's always wild to me. I feel like it's kind of that way across all niches, how when we're first starting, we work with like the most high need people. And
Hmm.
then as we actually get like the experience and skills to be able to do that, we're able to take a step back and kind of work with like the easier people. But
Yeah,
it's funny how that works.
absolutely. And it's definitely interesting to see how that shifts and like how there's a larger population with a less support need typically. So, those are the people that
Totally.
really need the support too.
Yep. Um, when you started your private practice, were you kind of instantly like, yes, I'm going to continue with like the same experience I got during schooling, or were you more broad when you first started?
Super broad. So I went down kind of that Instagram rabbit hole when I was first starting of like, I'm gonna kind of do this thing I see everyone else doing. But I thought my niche was like way too narrow, way too kind of outlandish to really be successful. So I went a completely different route and did kind of like the anxiety, goal setting, like that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And it didn't work out. I think it just wasn't authentic to like who I really wanted to work with and like what my specialties actually were. So that's where I started. I got on insurance panels to try to help fill that caseload at that point. But it was really a mixed bag for a
Yeah.
while.
When you say that you were kind of posting about anxiety and setting goals, but it wasn't working, what do you mean by that? Like you weren't getting followers or views or?
All of the above. I had tried before going on insurance, I think it was maybe 4 months of like this Instagram posting and stuff. I hadn't learned a lot about it, but was trying to kind of wing it there. And yeah, I mean, a couple hundred followers, not a lot of views, zero conversions to clients, things like
Yeah.
that.
How did Instagram feel in that period where you were showing up and making content, but not really getting the results you wanted?
It was definitely frustrating. I also, like I said, I was trying to kind of do it on my own without a lot of support, thinking like, oh, it can't be that hard. It is if you don't know the background of like why you're doing what you're doing and things like that. But I think a lot of it is like it was inauthentic because I wasn't really. I was trying to like be more salesy and sell to people that I thought wanted the service versus actually authentically who I wanted to work with.
Yeah. It sounds like at that time it was kind of like what you thought you should and needed to be doing versus like this is really what I want to be doing.
Absolutely. And like what I thought success would kind of look like.
Yeah. I definitely had that experience when I first started too of like I just didn't I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing,
Yeah.
right? And I knew that I was certain enough that I wanted to do it that I was like that's okay. I don't need to have a plan. I don't need to get
Hmm.
results right away. Like I'm going to keep showing up. But for me, I think there was a point when for me my passion is anxiety, but when I started talking about anxiety where I was like, "Oh, like this is actually really fun. I'm like able
Yeah.
to be more silly in my reels or like have
Hmm.
more of my personality instead of being like here's whatever, like this exact coping skill and thing that you need to
Yes.
do."
That was
Um,
the other, I was definitely trying to go more that educational route at first. And it feels textbooky. And like, I don't think a lot of people are going to relate to that and catch
yeah.
on to it.
Especially I think in the era of like chat GPT and everything, there's just like so much information out there for people. I don't think that
Hmm.
anybody is going to Instagram per se to say, how do I breathe or how do
Yeah.
I set goals or, you know, like all that information is very Googleable,
Hmm.
versus a lot of the content that you create now feels a lot more specific to what individual people are experiencing.
Right.
At what point did you kind of decide to shift your niche from anxiety to adults with later diagnosed autism?
So it was funny. I actually, while I was on insurance and kind of doing that route, I found a few people that just kind of like fell into my plate that were in that niche. And I was like, okay, like this is what I need to be doing. So it was around that time that I joined PPA, which I think was late April of this year, that I really just kind of like did an overhaul. I like redid my whole Instagram. I hadn't been posting for a while and just kind of went in head first with it. And it quickly, caught on and worked out for me.
Yep. That's a very specific niche. Were there fears that, like, what if there's not enough people who are in this experience or who want to be able to see me without insurance for like this very hyper specific niche?
Absolutely. And I will say, even at that point, I was doing like ADHD and autism. And like
Okay.
little by little, I kind of like, and I wasn't saying late diagnosed or adults or even like, I slowly became more narrow. But absolutely, I was kind of terrified that there wouldn't be, especially if you're only looking at like one or two states you're licensed in. It's
Mm-hmm.
scary to think if there's going to be enough people that can fill that caseload.
Yep. Were you with PsyPact in the beginning, or was that something you got kind of later on?
It's something I got later on once I decided to go off of insurance panels because IPACT and insurance is kind of a tricky thing to navigate anyway. So it was like, if I'm going to do this, then I can go ahead and add this on as like a boost.
Yep. Do you remember the first time that you posted about like kind of this specialty on Instagram or?
Um, Not specific, like as I got more narrow, I don't remember like the exact post. But I definitely started to dabble and like, okay, let me make a couple posts about this and then one back about ADHD or something like that. And then
Yep.
slowly I just kind of phased the other stuff out.
Yep. How about the first time that you went viral?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Which that was interesting too because it's always kind of delayed, right? So it was a
Mhm.
week or two after I posted the post, and then you see the likes and the views kind of grow. And yeah, like I think I had like 500 or 800 followers at that time, so it skyrocketed like instantly. And yeah, it was a pretty mind blowing month or so.
Was that post that went viral about being like late diagnosed with autism or?
Yeah, so my I've had like a few that I use the term viral loosely because it's still like a very niche viral, so like 300,000 views.
Yeah.
They're all just like very specific of like, I'm a therapist who works with XYZ, you know, follow my page kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it was like a formula almost. I had a few in a row that just took off, but it was like very specific to the work I was doing.
Yep. I wonder if we could pull up one of those and kind of like read it for people so they could hear exactly what that sounds like.
Absolutely. There was that one where it was like a whistle audio,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a picture or a video of like b-roll me writing in my notebook, and it says patiently waiting for all the late diagnosed autistic folks to find my page so they can finally feel seen and heard by a therapist. That was it.
Yep. So I think that that's like a beautiful example because you didn't have to say anything earth shattering or
Not at all.
specific,
Yep.
right? But we took it a much further step than saying, like, waiting for all the people with autism to find my page,
Hmm.
right? Like, I think that having that late diagnosis there really spoke to, like, you are an individual human with an individual experience, and this is for you,
Right.
right? So, like, if I were to do that same prompt with anxiety, I wouldn't just be like waiting for all the anxious girls to find my page because that's not very specific,
Yeah.
right? But maybe it's like waiting for all the anxious girls with 4 loads of laundry that hasn't been folded and 85 things on their to-do list to find my page, right?
Yes.
Something that makes people say like, oh, that's really specific. And that is me.
Yeah, and I think that's where the conversion to like actual followers versus a like or a view on it comes from, is like when they really feel seen and like, okay, this person gets me.
Yeah. Do you know how many followers you got from that reel or?
It was between 8 and 9,000.
Wow.
And I had like maybe 2,000 or something by the time I posted that one.
Yep.
Yeah. So big difference.
That that's like life-changing amount
Yeah.
of followers to get from one reel.
Yes. Yeah. And I had, like I said, it was a few kind of following that formula kind of back like over the same like month and a half that
Yep.
took off in that same way. That was the highest one, but
Where is your following at now?
just under 28,000.
Very cool. Have those followers led to actual therapy clients?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm in kind of a weird spot because I do a lot of the evaluation side of things. So those are more one off appointments, but that's been super successful. And I kind of have my therapy slots blocked off for now to only be people that got an evaluation. So that way I can continue seeing them.
Yep.
But yeah, it took off pretty quickly as the followers took off.
Mm-hmm. So for the evaluations, those are people who are like, I'm later in life, I'm an adult, I think I have autism, but I haven't actually been diagnosed yet. Is that correct?
Yep,
Does that
exactly.
feel hard for you to kind of like speak to that group of people who maybe doesn't even know for sure if they're your ideal client?
It does. I will say with social media, a lot of people are like self-diagnosing by the time they get
Mm-hmm.
to me, so they're pretty confident in their label. I think one of the hard things is I'm opposite of a lot of the therapists we talk to. I'm not my ideal client, so I think
Yep.
it's a little awkward and sometimes on my end to like speak to people that I don't know their exact experience. I'm doing a lot of assumptions, a lot of learning on my end, but I don't have that lived experience.
Yep. And so I imagine the kind of like push and pull there is like you've worked with dozens of clients who this is applied to. And so you do have a lot of like historical information around the
Mhm.
things that they might be struggling with, but can't say, I get this or when this happened to me kind of thing, and really
Yes.
bringing yourself into the content.
Exactly. So there's some tailoring the content in that way, but I was scared I would get like negative feedback for that. I've got nothing but positive feedback on that end. So that's been really helpful in kind of boosting my confidence in my
Yeah.
role.
How do you kind of show up as yourself and bring like your own personality into your content? If it's not in like I feel like I do this. I do a lot of like kind of like self-deprecating content
Mhm.
of like I'm the same version of anxious as you,
Yes.
right? Where it's easy for people to say she gets it.
It's definitely harder. And I'll be honest, I don't think I'm someone that shows up a ton in that way. Like I
Hmm.
haven't been good at doing stories or stuff like that. Honestly, a lot of it is just kind of putting those examples out there of like, these are the things I've seen. And I think they really just kind of grasp onto that. So, yes and no, I guess is kind of the short answer of like, I haven't been great at it, but I think it's getting the job done in some ways.
Yep. Do you talk much on Instagram, like using your voice in reels or stories, or is it mostly like B-roll type of stuff?
It's a lot of B-roll. I do try with the Reels membership, how we get like the one a week. That's more of the talking. I try to do those. It can be discouraging because I don't tend to get the same number of views or things
Yeah.
that other ones do, but I have had some do really well as well. So I try to do those. I feel like that's our time to actually give more information and do more of that educational piece.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I try to do those. I'm not super consistent with those either, though, to be
Cool.
honest.
If you're not doing a ton of stories and we're not doing a ton of reels talking, how are you getting people to go from your Instagram page to booking like an evaluation with you?
I think for me, the biggest thing is there's so few providers that are providing this service. So people are like, okay, I finally found someone and they jump on it. So I think
Yeah.
that's boosting me a little bit. I do think the more that I were speaking and actually engaging in that way, that would assist in it. But I think right now there's just kind of a drought in services provided.
Yeah. It's interesting of like there being kind of that gap in the market, right? And
Hmm.
that you're really able to fill that gap. And that by having like even again like a very hyper niche population, there's not a ton of people who fit into that category. There's
Hmm.
also even less therapists who are speaking directly to them.
Yes, absolutely. And like I've tried to network with more therapists and stuff, and like I have a handful, but not a whole lot.
Yeah. I know, there's a few therapists on Instagram now who work with men where it's
Hmm.
like, oh, that's a huge population of people. Obviously, it's like half the country, right? But it's not a huge population of therapy seekers. But it's kind
Yes.
of the same thing
Hmm.
here, right? Where like there's still a lot of people, there's still a lot of men who want to go to therapy.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to say, I work with men, that already helps you stand out so, so much.
Yeah. And I think you explained at one time where it was like, what do you need? Like 15, 20 people to fill a caseload.
Yeah.
That's not that, like, even if it is one state, like you're looking for 20 people in a state. That's not, you know,
Yeah.
we don't need millions of people to fall into your niche. You just need a handful.
And we have 27,000 people who've fallen
Yes.
into your niche on Instagram regardless, which
Fair.
is really freaking cool.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, are you really just kind of like saying in captions, like, I'm accepting new clients for evaluations, like in 43 states or in your bio, or people are just kind of like exploring your website because they see your content or like, I got to know what I could do here? Or,
Yeah, so I have a call to action that I put in pretty much every caption that's saying like follow the link in my bio, for this evaluation, which then brings you to kind of an information page, then to like the Calendly to schedule an intro call. I think the intro calls have been really helpful just because it's a nerve wracking. I mean, therapy as well, right? People
yeah,
want to talk to you before they commit to anything, so I think that's been just a good way to like ease nerves and get to know the people before they're committing.
totally. Do you find that most clients that book an intro call end up moving forward with you for actually scheduling the evaluation or?
So that's kind of ebbed and flowed as I've figured things out. So for a while, I was having a little more trouble converting. I think there were more people signing up for intro calls without reading the fine print kind of thing. So
Yeah,
that's when I added that information page, things like that. At this point, it's pretty successful. But for a while, it was like a 50% ish
yeah.
conversion rate, which isn't terrible, but it is a lot of calls that aren't converting.
Yeah, for sure, which I know can feel frustrating and disappointing on both ends, right?
Absolutely.
That's one of the reasons why I'm so big on therapists like listing their rate on their website and putting
Mhm.
it, where people can see it if you need to, like add it to the confirmation email or whatever.
That's I think I have my rate in like 5 different places at this point, just so like it's out there. They have to like click a yes I agree button before they can book the intro call, and I think that's helped a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Because it sucks on your end to be like, here's a human that I enjoyed talking to and would love to help and know I can help. And it sucks
Mhm.
on their end too of like, I had hope. I thought that she was going to be the person for me.
Yeah.
So it's so good to be clear and upfront about that.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think a lot of it does come down to cost, which I totally get, but that way at least we're setting expectations that way.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of guilt kind of going off of insurance panels and increasing your rate and charging a pretty premium fee for evaluations or?
Absolutely. And it's still something that I kind of work through that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a big difference. And I did, a lot of people are able to keep clients when they kind of transition off of insurance. A lot of my clients just weren't in those positions to do private pay, which is
Yep.
totally fine. So I lost most of my clients, which was sad. I had people I'd been working with for 2, 3 years that like, it
Yeah.
hurts. So yeah, definitely a lot of guilt there. But just kind of knowing you're doing the right thing for yourself long term, and you can show up as a better therapist if you are charging a higher rate and not spreading yourself super thin,
Yep.
across too many appointments.
Do you mind talking through that a bit more? If not, like that's totally okay. I'm
Yeah.
curious about like how your clients kind of responded to that news or what that was like to kind of
Yeah.
hold space for.
So a lot of them, they chose me because I was like, prior to Instagram and stuff like that, a lot of them chose me because I was like the person on their, when they pulled up their insurance thing, I was the
Yep.
closest person kind of thing. So a lot of them, I think that was their only option, in financial situations that it just wasn't possible. Um, and so that it stinks, right? Because I had like students and things like that that just don't have out of network benefits or, whatever. And it's put you in a difficult situation where you feel like you're kind of having to choose between keeping these clients or doing what's right for your business. And
Yep.
yeah, it's definitely tricky. I just actually, I'd gone off my main insurance panel. I was still on Alma. I just like told my clients January 1st is kind of my cutoff for that. So that
Yep.
was ripping another band-aid off, but you know little by
Very
little.
exciting.
Yeah.
I actually got a DM from a former client like last week who I had worked with probably 3 years ago and worked with her on insurance for about a year. And when I got off of insurance panels, she couldn't make it work and we
Hmm.
stopped our work together. And she sent me the sweetest message about like finally ending her toxic relationship and now getting married and being
Hmm.
like pregnant with somebody new and saying like, you know, I know that we stopped working together because you got off of my insurance, but I just wanted to say like thank you. You were like such a big part of my journey. The therapist you connected me with was like wonderful and whatever. And
Hmm.
it was so nice because it was somebody I hadn't like I literally
Yeah.
hadn't seen her in 3 years, right?
And I
And
love those catch up emails because, like,
yes,
I don't think people realize how hard it is on our end to just like let them go and then not get those updates.
totally. And it was so cool too because I think like, you know, she felt disappointed at the time, right?
Hmm.
Like, of course, I think we were both bummed that we couldn't
Yeah.
continue to work together, but that there was not like this resentment or
Hmm.
she didn't perceive me to be like a bad person or think that I wasn't going to care about her or anything like
Right.
that because I made that decision. And so I think it's just really cool to see that both people can choose to do what works for them. Like your
Hmm.
clients can choose that, you know, obviously I would never want anyone to like go in debt or take out loans or something to pay for therapy with
Sure.
me. They can choose it doesn't work for their
Hmm.
finances and I can choose to like need something else for mine.
Yeah. And I've found that for sure. Like, not a lot of frustration towards me, maybe some frustration towards the systems that kind of
Oh
make
yeah,
this
for sure.
happen, which we can both, agree upon. So, but yeah, it's nice to know that things are on good terms, and it's a not ideal situation, but at least you're getting good outcomes out of it still.
Yep. Did you get any feedback from clients who maybe you had worked with previously that were not in kind of like this niche that you were marketing on Instagram or
Yeah, and I think like some of them we did really good work together. Like there's always going to be overlap and stuff like that in the therapy room. So while it wasn't my exact niche, I think there's still good work to be done, and I had really good rapport. Um, but it's just kind of transitioning into kind of more of like a business model of what I want my business to look like versus like these individual relationships.
yeah. Um, so I know that you were thinking about launching another offer because your practice was so full with clients from Instagram. Tell me a little bit about where that's at and how it's going.
Yeah, so I really wanted a way to be able to reach more people than what I can in a typical week, especially like with licensing and stuff. There's people in other countries, things like that. And I really wanted a way to kind of reach those people, even if it's not direct one to one services. So I was trying to do kind of like a podcast, kind of educational type of membership, um, and quickly became a little overwhelmed by that. I think I was trying to grow a little too fast in my business and what I was comfortable with, and taking on a little bit more than I could chew. Um, Not to say like never say never. It might be in the future, but
Yeah.
not a right now thing for me.
More so because like the maybe interest wasn't there from your community or like the idea of passive income actually requires a lot of work in the upfront portions.
Both.
Yeah.
So I did like a soft launch, and it didn't get a ton of traction. I'm sure if I continued and, so we're, if I continued to kind of market it that way, then, I'm sure it would have grown a bit. But it was a lot of work on my end. And it was just a lot of added stress of like coming up with the content. We're kind of in this day and age if I'm used to short form content, and
Yeah.
the thought of trying to record like a 30-minute video on my end was stressing me out beyond belief. So I think
Yeah.
that was a big piece of it as well.
It is definitely another beast. I feel
Yes.
like depending on what side of the internet you're on, there's like all these people who are like, oh, I made a course in like 2 weeks and I made $1 zillion. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I love courses. A big part of my business is courses, but it takes so many hours of work up front, unpaid, before you can make any money back. And then
Mm-hmm.
quite a long time after that to actually like build it up to a point that it feels really scalable and worth it.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of pressure right now, or at least I was putting pressure on myself. I was seeing a lot of therapists growing and doing these scaling options. And it was like, okay, that's the next step. But I also think it's okay to like be content with the step you're at for a bit. And like you can make a really good income doing one-to-one services. You don't have to do these huge scaling offers to like make a good income or make an impact. And I think I just needed to remind myself of that a little bit.
Totally. I think too, it's hard when like I definitely felt this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like I feel like I'm a very ambitious person,
Mm-hmm.
right? It seems kind of like you are too. So January, you went full time in your practice. April, you joined Private Practice Academy. It's November now. We've already launched and then taken away an offer in like
Mm-hmm.
that same year,
Yes.
right? That like that's a lot of progress to make in 1 year period
Mm-hmm.
to quit your job, go full time, fill a caseload, get a wait list, like all this stuff to then already jump into what's next instead of
Yeah.
like how can I have this feel as easy as possible, as good as possible, as like celebratory as possible.
Exactly. And I think I'm still in the process of streamlining just like the back end administrative sides of things. And I think if I get those a little more comfortable, then maybe in the future. But I think that's kind of my focus for now.
Yeah. What's it like to think about where you were like January of this year, 11 months ago?
It's completely wild. I had no intention of being where I'm at right now. I had planned to stay. I think if you go back in our messages, I messaged you right before I joined Private Practice Academy saying, like, I don't want to get off insurance. I just want to fill my caseload. I
Yep.
need like 5 more clients, nothing too crazy. This was not on my bingo card at all for 2024. So it's all great changes, but not what I was planning on at all.
Yep. Has there been any whiplash of like, yeah, just any whiplash around how big of a difference that's been with like what your business actually looks like now?
Yeah, and just for a little context, we also did a cross country move in January. So I
Oh
moved
my
from
gosh,
New
I don't think
Jersey
I
to
knew
North
that.
Carolina, bought a house, all of so like my whole life is completely different. So it's just been a lot of like that happened coupled with quitting my full-time job like same
Yep.
weekend kind of thing. So it's been it's kind of eye-opening to think back of like what income looked like then, what my hours looked like because when you're growing a part-time practice and working full-time at the same time, I think I was working 50 hours or so a week, and
Yep.
that's exhausting. So to go from that to 15 or 20 is completely life changing.
Yep. What do you do with your free time?
I could be better with it. So we live in like a little mountain town in North Carolina now, so a lot of hiking, a lot of outdoor stuff, but really just having time to relax. I was
Yep.
go 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 before, like things like exercise and just like taking time for myself weren't. I mean, they could have been an option, but it was really hard to fit them in when I was working at a high school full time and seeing clients in the evenings and on Saturdays. And it's just like
Yep.
there wasn't enough hours in the day for what I was trying to do. So just being able to take a breath and have some downtime, leisure time has been incredible.
Yep. Is that what you kind of consider a full caseload for you now, like 15 to 20 clinical hours a week? Or I'm
Yeah,
sure the
it usually
client number
fall.
differs since you're doing evaluations, but
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of what it's falling to right now, and I feel like I'm at a really good spot. I don't want to grow. I don't really want to shrink at this point. I think we're at a good spot. So I have like one therapy day, 1 or 2 eval days a week, and then like a couple therapies on those evenings. But overall, it's pretty compact.
very cool. Did you need to take like an income dip to go from like 50 to 60 hours a week to 15 to 20 hours a week?
So at the beginning, yes, just because I was losing that full time income and it takes
Yep.
some time to build up the part time to full time. So, like when I started Private Practice Academy, I was probably teetering on matching that full time income, but I wasn't having both
Yep.
anymore. At this point, I would say I'm making about 2 to 2.5 what I was making at my full time job
Yep.
and almost half the hours.
That is very cool.
Yes,
Yeah. I feel
absolutely.
like that just gives so much freedom and flexibility, both with like the time that you're having to work and be in front of your
Hmm.
computer with clients, and then also like all the fun things that you get to do outside of work when
Yes,
you have the
exactly.
finances to be able to do it.
And just the stress that's not there anymore of how are we going to pay for this or that or having that flexibility there just eases a lot of stress and anxiety.
Amazing. What advice would you give to a therapist who is thinking about niching down, but maybe a little bit afraid to do so?
So I might be biased in this. I think the more narrow you can go, the better in a lot of ways. I'm sure there's some kind of cutoff line there where it's not good anymore. But for me, it was like the more specific I got, the more people felt seen and wanted to work with me. So I see it all the time where people are really nervous. And I was that person for a while too. But as soon as I got really true to like, this is the exact person I want to work with, that's when my page took off. That's when my business took off.
Yep, amazing. I always say if you're speaking to everybody, you're speaking to nobody. So I
Yeah.
think that like the more specific we can be in our language and really just picking one person, the better.
Absolutely. And I think, I have a lot of people that are so it's funny because I look at my clients and I'm like, you guys would make great friends, right? Like I have so many people that it's like they're very similar, but it's also completely unique every session you go into of like different things you're working on, different life circumstances, but there's still that common thread.
Yep. I think that life circumstance piece is huge too, right? Especially like that changes so much, right? So,
Hmm.
like for me, when I started, I was working a lot with anxious millennial women, which were like single, kind of like living in New York City, like high
Hmm.
career. And now a ton of my clients are like married, they have kids, they're like taking time
Yeah.
off, right? And so it's so cool to be able to work with the same people and kind of see them through different stages
Hmm.
of life,
Absolutely.
and how their goals can change. And like that can create so much variety in your caseload as well.
Yes, definitely.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Selena. I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Of course. Thank you again for having me.